You know, how many bands not got to not make a record on Atlantic, all got dropped because of one man's excess spending, pointless, needless spending on that album. I got the call from Roy Thomas Baker and Dan, actually, from The Darkness, to would I like to be the engineer on their second album. Obviously, they'd gone massive, and at the time, biggest rock band in the world, and massive singles. And yeah, it was time for album 2, which they decided to use Roy. And obviously, it's well known they loved Queen, and there's a big Queen influence on them. So going to Rockfield, using the quadrangle where Queen had recorded Night of the Opera and Sheer Heart Attack, that was like massive for them. And then it was like, well, shall I bring my engineer? And Dan's two favourite albums, recent albums that had been done, were pretty sure they were the Teenage Fan Club one and the Beta Band, bizarrely. So, and
I wasn't expecting that.
So when he looked at them, I'd done both those albums, so he was like, yeah, we should use Nick. He's from Rockfield. We're going to Rockfield, blah, blah, blah. Spoke to Dan, spoke to Roy, met Dan and when he came to look at the studios, and yeah, hit it off straight away, and that was it. On to One Way Ticket, the second album.
'Cause I remember you saying that The Darkness was really almost like the last big album.
Yeah.
Of like the old school budgets.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first one that had come along for a while at Rockfield of that kind of budget. I mean, they booked the whole place because Roy didn't want anyone else around. The Coach House studio was used as like pre-production rehearsals, and the quadrangle was used as the main recording studio. And then some of the band were staying up in the Coach House, some were staying over in the quadrangle. The whole place was booked, massive expense, private chefs brought in, and it went on for 16 weeks. So we thought it'd be 6, but it went on for 16 weeks. Massive, massive expense. And that wasn't the end of it. Then it was 10 weeks in Whitfield Street in London. Then it was 4 weeks in Arizona. So massive long album, massive budgets, higher budgets. Like you hadn't seen that since like the mid to late 90s, really, that kind of budget for hire equipment. Mm-hmm. Hiring in guitars, hiring in outboard, hiring in chefs, hiring cars.
Why did you hire cars?
Well, I didn't. Obviously, Roy did. A complete waste of money, complete waste of time. That money could have been much better spent, probably invested in some new bands and some new talent, developing it. You know, how many bands not got to not make a record on Atlantic, all got dropped because of one man's excess spending, pointless, needless spending on that album. It sickened me at the time, actually. Yeah.
So was it Land Rover, Mercedes?
Big Mercedes. Big Mercedes. Oh yeah, it had to be left running because it had to be at optimum temperature at all times in case he needed to get in it and go and pick up his phone charger from a house that was about 30 yards away. So I'd offered to go pick up the charger. Why don't you just turn it off, save some fuel, you know, do a bit for the environment and save some money, and we could run up and get it for you. Yeah, very strange goings on. Very strange. But, I mean, it was the start of a great relationship with them guys for me. You know, it was a tough album to do, the tough second album, where it was quite difficult to work with. Lots going on behind the scenes on that album. Lots of not great things, but ultimately an amazing band with amazing songs, amazing players, great people, making a great record, you know. And for what I saw as really negative points with Roy, I did learn a lot off him. You know, the best use of recording the tape I'd ever seen was with Roy. The stuff I learned how to record and the kind of levels he could slam to tape and all that technical side of it was just in awe of him watching it. His knowledge and his ability to do that, and then the other side of producing, I learned loads like how not to do shit and how not to be a dick.
So do you learn you learn a little bit about the guitar sounds of Queen how we got the Queen guitar?
Yeah.
Is that right?
The Queen guitar sounds. Yeah, so luckily they still got the preamps there that he would have used in the 70s, so we could, the chain was pretty much the same as it was in the 70s, obviously slightly different amps, so then we got the Voxes in and everything as well. But there was, I mean, it was just excessive. Everything was, why are we having one amp when we can have seven? You know, there was speakers in the echo chamber running long cables up on poles so that cars could still drive under them. They were up on poles, so they were like, it was like a washing line going across the courtyard to a 4x12 in the echo chamber. And then there'd be a 4x12 in the dead room, a 4x12 in the live room, and these would all be going at the same time. It was quite thorough getting the same. It was 2 weeks set up time for that album before a note was played. So we had like lots of, we'd try every 4x12 with every mic combination, every part of the room. And then we tried different combinations. And once we kind of got it, we'd nail it down. Same with the drums, loads of mics, moving them around. And once we got it, we'd actually had to literally measure the distance between the skin and the mic and the side of the drum and the mic, take photos of where they were, and we'd have to make sure it never ever moved. Because of his OCD, I guess, he could, you know, it always had to be exactly the same. So you come from this approach of working with someone like Owen, where a mic's fallen over, it sounds great, just leave it, to, you know, has it fallen over? Has it been like that for the last 7 takes? It sounds great. To someone who would absolutely lose his mind and tear you in your arsehole if it had even moved half a centimetre.
I suppose, has that come from like the, you know, if he came out from like being traditionally trained in some like, you know, like the old, you know, like some of the more formal studios, like Abbey Road or like the Trident stuff, where like, you know, that everyone had the white coats and stuff, and you had to kind of be very precise. And I suppose it's great for the recall.
Yeah.
So it's like, say you came back to a song.
Yeah, elements of that is great. And I'm sure it comes from, some of it comes from that. Other elements of it come from OCD. And some just come from pointless because we can, and because...
Yeah.
Let's just...
And it's mad now you think about it. It's like, obviously, it's great to have that time for setup, and now, like, you don't really get those opportunities anymore. It's more like, okay, we might get a day for a setup.
Can you imagine a band going, right, we're going to take 2 weeks to get the sounds? You'd be like, we have like about a week to record a whole album now. You know, 2 weeks to mix it as well.
Yeah.
So it was completely excessive. £1 million spent, and I mean, the album could have been made a lot cheaper than that. You know, they still, at the end of the day, they still made a great album. We had a great time. There was really hard times and difficult times making that album, but myself and the band and Richie, Dan's tech, and well, the band's tech for the whole record, who was there the whole time. We eventually ended up joining the Darkness and then Stone Gods. Lovely man. It was, we all bonded and we had a great time. But it was a difficult album to make as well. Long, arduous process. But you always learn things, even in negative situations. You always learn if it's not how not to do something, or if you can see, you know, pick up great tips off someone as legendary as Roy, you know, then it's great. But I didn't like his methods and his processes and his treatment of people. Really, I felt that was unnecessary, and not a world that I come from or came from, and was certainly involved in for the first kind of 10 years of my career through the 90s, working with those kind of guys. Yeah, not really seen that. One or two possibly producers now and again, but that whole style, and you know, when you can say to someone, I've already been paid a few $1 million to work with Axl Rose and we've not recorded anything yet, you know, that's a completely different world. That, you know, he just comes around my house, we just kind of write some lyrics, then he goes home, we haven't recorded anything yet, but you know, and it's couple of $1 million in the bank and nothing has been recorded, and we're struggling to make records on shoestring budgets all of a sudden, and bands are trying their best to make records. It's like this, just a world I wasn't in and comfortable with, really.
Yeah. So the album gets finished, the album comes out, and then what will happen next thing is does Dan approach you about Leeders Farm?
Yeah, we stayed in touch. Obviously, we worked off a long time through that. It was, I mean, you know, me and Dan were there at that computer. Roy doesn't go near the computer, so we were kind of there the whole time. Me and Dan kind of doing majority of the editing and kind of stuff on that album. You know, Dan was as much as a producer as Roy, really. He's a great engineer and a great producer, actually really good mix engineer as well, Dan is. As is Justin. Justin's really, really good as well. So yeah, it was after we stayed in touch, went to some live shows, and then Dan messaged me and said he'd bought this this farmhouse in Norfolk, and said he was kind of fed up of like, being on tour and then having to write a record and then having to go away to rehearsals down to London. You've got to stay in hotels, and you've just got back from staying in hotels for a year, you know, and you want to spend time with family and with friends. So he was like, I bought this place. I want a rehearsal room there so the band can all come here. We can all be together. We don't have to go hotels. When we're back off tour, we can got somewhere we can come and not have to go down to London. So he's like, when you come up and have a look and see, we want to record our rehearsals. Maybe you can put a little setup in for me. So I went up and he had a few bits of gear, and we looked at it, and the main barn his dad was working on was going to be the main live room for the rehearsing, and then there was a separate room, and we were like, we're going to separate this off, and we can have a little setup in here so you can record and work in that, you know, work just in that room because it was a massive room as well. So yeah, it was like I bought a few bits of gear, got my mate's studio K involved, and started putting a little demo setup together. And we actually, while doing it, we recorded a couple of B-sides for The Darkness with me and Dan producing them, and they ended up coming out really well. And it was just a like little makeshift demo studio at that point. And then it fell apart for The Darkness, and Dan was like, right, well, what are we going to do now? We're going to starting to fall apart for The Darkness at that point. And we was like, well, we should build a proper studio. We should do our next album here, the next Darkness record here. This should be, me and you should produce it. He said, we'd do it here. All the money we can save, we'll have a decent budget. We'll all get paid really well. We can take as long as we want, blah, blah, blah. And he really wanted to produce that next album and do it with me. So we started putting a proper studio together, the design, the acoustics, the layout, everything. His dad was an amazing builder, and his uncle's electrician. So between them two and his other uncle, lovely man, who was a proper grafter as well, Uncle Alan, I think he was. They set about building the studio that we designed, and we built a proper residential studio from scratch, sitting up night after night, just like studying university papers, what we wanted, talking about all the great studios we'd been to in the past. So it would have elements of Rockfield, Ridge Farm, Mono Valley, the Manor, all these great residentials. How can we do this? And just making sure we made great use of every little space in the place, but also giving it a vibe and some magic that when you walked in, you just went, it was a wow. And we did, and that was Leeders Farm was born.
How long did the build process take?
Well, we started it in the November, I think we're about 2006, November 2006 maybe, and we finished in August the following year. So the following year, I got my mate Mark Ruby actually came in for like kind of the first session as like a test session. Came in, we got a band in. So through to the following August. I mean, this was an 8-bedroom residential studio with 3 acres of land, football pitch, fruit orchards, 2 little lakes, a little boat on the pond or lake, whatever you want to call it. Massive live room, vocal booth, separate machine room, amazing sized control room. We went to Whitfield Street, where obviously we'd spent 10 weeks on the second Darkness album, and they'd closed down. And we went to the auctions, and just me and Dan, we'd kind of thought about what we wanted to buy from there, because obviously building a big studio, a lot of this stuff was really useful to us. And we went around and we were talking to people, you know, all the Funk Junk guys and other people, and they were like, there's so much stuff here. We're just going to wait and see what the first few lots go for and then gauge the prices, because at the beginning it's always too high, and then as it tails off and the prices come down, blah, blah, blah. And I just said to Dan, I think we should just steam in, get all the best pieces first, get in and get out. And he was like, yeah, definitely. So we did, and we ended up getting everything like not stupidly cheap, but way cheaper than if we'd have waited. So we got the pick. Like we could, you know, the best. We got the better tape machines, the better plates. We got all the LCAs. We got all the 1176s, the U47, the mic collection. We just came out of there with like so much stuff. It was amazing, and we got it really reasonable. By the end, people were paying more for an RE20 that you could buy them new for. It was just ridiculous. So a truck came and we loaded it all back up, and that was ready for the install because the building work was kind of almost done. And I think Island Studios had closed down at that point as well, and they donated. Right. They said to Dan, "We know you're building a studio," and he knew those guys from his days working with them. And they gave him things like the tannoys, the big DM2s, I think they were. So we had all of a sudden big monitors for the walls, donated loads of outboard from them, a few mics, and we had all our tape machines from Whitfield. And then the final piece of the puzzle was we bought the Calrec mixing console from Torag Studios.
Is that where it came from?
That's where it came from. It had done the White Stripes record, and he was fitting his EMI eventually that he'd had sat there for years. Right, okay. And that was the desk which we overhauled, modded. So when the install went in, we got the tech team from Rockfield, which was Richard Griffiths and Giles Bell, in to fit the studio. So between me, Dan, and those two, we installed the studio, and the desk was all modded with new transformers, and we made it direct outs and kind of gave it a full overhaul. And it just sounded so good, that desk. And
because, am I right in thinking, in Leeders Farm you had a Neve and a Calrec?
Yep. So Dan had bought the Neve. I think he might have bought it off Toby from Jamiroquai, I think. So we had the Neve sidecar, we had the Calrec console, and then we had a Control 24. So the Pro Tools was housed off to one side, so I could always be working there, and the desk was kind of all about just working at a desk. Bryson amps on the monitors.
See, the crazy thing now is like those Control 24s, you can still work on with Pro Tools now because I think it's Nayrink. They worked because they designed the. He was working for Avid at the time. Yeah, he's reverse engineered it so it would work on Mackie Control.
Right. Okay.
So you could They went like massive bricks and stuff for a bit, so we're selling for like £500. Yeah, and now they're still usable now.
We loved it.
Channels.
We loved not having to use the screen. We would turn the screens off sometimes and just use the Control 24. And we had one of the early ones, which I think had the better Focusrite pre's in, which maybe
so they might have had the ISA pre's
in it, which just sounded great. And we A/B tested when we did recorded guitars with Dan. We would always A/B test between. Using the Calrec, using the Neve, or using the Control 24. And sometimes we would pick blind tests. So sometimes we would pick the Control 24. Those ISA-Pres were great as well. But we had everything, all the gear, the outboard, the mic collection. He bought the 47s that had been used on AC/DC records, and fantastic studio, amazing sounding studio. We could change the ambience in the live room with these kind of sails that we'd built on the ceiling, and it was really high ceiling. We had great. If you get a chance, look up the pictures online for Leeders Farm, and a really nice 300-year farmhouse with open fires and grand piano in the lounge and business. And it wasn't long before business was already booming, and we started to attract really good clients.
Yeah, because you it got nominated in it for Studio of the Year. Was that early on?
Yeah, early on. So maybe not the first year was kind of the rest of that first year was Darkness had finished by this point, so Dan was like, right, we'll go commercial with the studio. So the Stone Gods had started, so we were working on a Stone Gods record, which is a fantastic album that they made, the first album. And a few little bits of sessions, a lot of my clients that I'd worked with started coming. And then a man called, we had a phone call from a mutual friend of mine and Dan's, a Welsh guy, and he was managing a guy called Seasick Steve, who had nowhere to live and wanted to make an album. And Seasick basically came and lived with us for 6 months. We took him in. He just bought his van and his porridge pot, and that was it. We made an album, and halfway through that album, he signed a big deal. Big publishing deal, big record deal, and all of a sudden at the age of 67 or something, he got his first major record deal halfway through making this album. He had some amazing equipment and amazing guy to work with. Yeah, really recording everything live, just him and his drummer, really good. And he loved our studio with all the vintage gear and the countryside and all that. It was right up his street. And it was a great album to be involved in. So because that was like the first, and that was the first year really, and that brought us clients like through working with Steve was like Nick Cave and Katie Tunstall, and then it just kind of escalated, and loads of great bands of that time just started coming there, and we got Studio of the Year in I think the Music Week Studio of the Year, whatever it was. 2009. So yeah, we started build like 2007. So yeah, 2009 we were Studio of the Year. And that just, it went from strength to strength. You know, bands like the Artic Monkeys came in. I did all the pre-production with those guys for Humbug there. They'd had a big break from playing, so they were getting to know each other again, getting to play, and I set them up in a circle or live, just a few mics, kind of like Rick Rubin would have done or something like that. Was in my head. Yeah, they were an amazing band, blew me away. And so work with Alex, amazing, like so talented. And yeah, it was a great session to be involved in. Lots of great bands then just came through, and you know, new and established bands and old bands, Steve Harley, people like that. And it was this new studio that all of a sudden just had all these amazing clients. Teenage Fan Club came back, did a solo album with Jerry from Teenage Fan Club there, an album with Paul Quinn, who was in Teenage Fan Club for Primary 5 there, loads of Scottish bands. And yeah, me and Dan producing records together, because Dan had really got into his producing. We did produce the Stone Roads record together. We had, and an amazing part of the world, actually, the location, the village, the people we became friends with in the village, the local pub with Tony in the pub. Everything just worked and everything fitted, and it was like the ideal studio. And we got so busy that we'd had to put a second studio in, which we had some accommodation in like an outbuilding, and in the end we were like, we need another studio because we can't work on our stuff. Me and Dan couldn't, because the big studio was booked all the time. So we converted the outbuilding into Studio 2, had an old tape machine in there, had an old Soundcraft console in there, some great outboard.
Is that your Soundcraft 400?
It was because I've got the 400. It was an old black one, 16 channel. I can't remember what model it was now. I've got the 400 beams sat in the corner over there. Yeah, it was great, and we had a good mic collection because I had a lot of my own stuff, so a lot of that went into Studio 2, and then that became busy. And we were turning people away, but the second studio was great because it enabled the assistants to be able to record all the local bands, and so their engineering skills were getting better and better because they could go in with local artists, and we could do really good rates for local artists because we're strong believers in grassroots music and developing bands, something we've always done. So they could go in at this affordable studio with one of the assistants and make affordable records, and I could use it for mixing, and me and Dan would always be in there doing our editing and mixing, waiting for a day to become free in the big studio. And a bit like, you know, one of our claim to fame at Leeders Farm was a bit like Rockfield turning away Michael Jackson, is we've turned away Ed Sheeran, but on several occasions. We were so busy. This young kid used to come to the gate, ring our bell all the time. He was a big fan of The Darkness, and we didn't know who he was. He always came bringing his guitar. Can I come in? Can I do some recording? He used to email me to turn up at the gate again. And Dan would be like, oh, it's that kid at the gate again. We haven't got the studio time. So I remember showing him around. I think the Artic Monkeys were in, and I was showing this guy around, and he's like, is that the Artic Monkeys? I'm like, yeah. He's like, right. Of course, at this point, nobody knew who Ed Sheeran was. In the end, he was, he was kind of relentless, wanting to come in, and we would love to, but it was so busy. And I just said to him, look, as soon as the second studio is empty, you can come in, do some demos. We'll put you in with one of the assistants, whether it's Alex or Owen or Dougal, and they'll make a record with you, because he was so persistent, and his demos he'd sent me were really good. And he was always polite when he came to the gate, and because he was a fan of The Darkness and that. So, but we just didn't have any time, and it wasn't until we were judging a competition in Norfolk, called The Next Big Thing, I think it was, where he was on, and he won that competition, The Next Big Thing in East Anglia. It's quite a big competition for that area. So that was the next time we saw him. He was like, that's that guy who turns up at the studio all the time. So yeah, but he never got to come in, and then the rest obviously is history, you know, and it's not there anymore, so we can't come.
I suppose it does show you it does show you kind of the drive you have. Some artists where like they're kind of relentless, and like how much sometimes you need to work, I guess, for to kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it was the best studio in the area by far. He wanted to be in the best place. He was a fan of The Darkness, was getting to go and work in the Darkness studio, whatever. It was cool for him, you know, and he just wanted to record. He just wanted to record his tracks. You know, him and his acoustic. So, yeah. Sorry, Ed.
So How long were you at Leeders Farm for?
5 years. So from that 2006 when we started to in 2011. So the Darkness had got back together that year,
Right.
and they asked me to produce the album with them. So yeah, everything else was behind them by that point, and produced an album. We did Hotcakes at Leeders Farm, and virtually one of the last records that was done there. I think after that I might have done one more album with a band called Maker, which I think was possibly the last album. Lovely guys, again, loads of great fun.
Did we finish that album off in Rockfield?
We did, yeah. So we started it in there, and then literally
many years later,
that studio closed, and we had to finish it off at Rockfield. So I think maybe the Burning Crows and Maker were the last two bands there. But we'd done this Darkness album, and then obviously the Darkness were back recording. Obviously finances were tight, and Dan had this property there. There was this real estate that was worth a lot of money as real estate, with the land, with the planning permission to build other houses, and the place was so big it could be converted into two houses. So I tried to buy it, and I went with the bank and kind of figured out how much we could borrow, and it just wasn't enough compared to what it was worth as an investment, as a developer to a developer. And Dan said, well, if you're not going to be here running it and take it over, I don't think anybody should. It should live and die with us. Our blood, sweat and tears had gone into it. We'd built it into one of the best studios in the country in a very short space of time. And very sad to see it go. But it was like it was worth too much to the developers. And it got sold off. And it's a shame. Magic place. Sometimes you just create something with a bit of magic that you don't quite know how it got that magic. It just did. You could have built lots of other studios, and they're great studios, but something about that place just was the perfect setting, the location, the people around the place, the people we had working there, the just feel of the place, the rooms, the spaces, the sound, the equipment. It just all came together. Couldn't have asked for more with that studio, really.
I suppose, I think part of it is, the location is just Norfolk way.
So we were in
Norfolk.
A little village called Spooner Row, just between Wyndham and Attleborough.
Yeah, because it is. It's like, I suppose it's really close. It's really close to London, but it's far enough away.
Yeah, easy to get there on the train up to Norwich. Norwich is a great city as well.
Also, I think the experience that you and Dan had as well.
Yeah. We had the time of our lives. Stressful building it as well, but with time at the parties, the kind of that time of our lives, no kids, bit of surplus income, studio was doing well, blah, 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 and it's time of our lives, hit it off. It was really good friends. I got married at that point. He was the best man at my wedding. So happy memories.